Hello Internet, I'm Zon and welcome back to another episode of Drawing Commentary. As you can probably tell by the title card here as well as the title of this video, it's time to do another design retrospective where we take a look at past designs and talk through a little bit of the design process and a little bit about the different pieces. Now I did one of these at the very beginning of 2018 and it was pretty long video. The amount of material covered was, I think, 11 years, a sampling of 11 years worth of designs. And I mentioned in that video that I'd like to do something similar at the end of each year to go over the year's end and everything that had been posted, or at least a sampling of what's been posted for that year. And then the idea behind that would be to condense down the amount of material covered so it's not a 3-hour series of videos. So what I've got here is a sampling of all the designs I've posted in 2018. What I'll do is I'll go through them from chronological order starting at the beginning of the year in January, all the way up through designs that were posted in December of 2018. Well, it was overall pretty busy year for the studio and overall projects. We did have some things kicking off this year on the design side and new series and whatnot, so that'll be a good thing to sort of talk through. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. What I'll do is I will do my best to remember to state when the design was originally posted over on DeviantArt, and then, I'll say whatever I need to say before we move on to the next one. So let's get started. This first one in the collection is literally the first design that was posted at the beginning of calendar year 2018. This was posted on January 1st of the year, and fitting that it's a Monster Hunter design since those typically go up at the beginning of each month. This is the circular emblem for Tobi Kadachi from Monster Hunter World. Now, Monster Hunter World released in January of 2018, I believe. It might have been the second week. And leading up to the game's release over on the Monster Hunter subreddit, I had posted a couple circular emblems from some of the upcoming creatures with the intention of doing more once the game released. And Tobi Kadachi is one of the early mid-game bosses that you fight in Monster Hunter World. It is a quadrupedal, furry, lizard flying squirrel that channels electricity. And it's got a pretty interesting design, and because it's got somewhat long body and exceptionally long fluffy tail, it lent itself well to the whole circular emblem format here. As you can see from the body, I went for sort of light blue tealish palette which matches its skin in game, and I added some darker highlights and lighter highlights for what would be the fur. Overall, this one had about as much detail as the other circulars that I've done. The main body segments that go all the way along the body here were arrayed along a central point. I basically copied them all the way across the middle and then deleted out the rest of the circle and then started adding things like the tail and then eventually connecting the head with the rest of the body. So overall, pretty straightforward design. This was one of my favorite of the new monsters. World did a pretty good job of adding kind of new monster types that hadn't been in the series before, and I definitely spent a lot of time playing the game. They're still sort of updating it, and they announced the first sort of expansion for Monster Hunter World coming out in the fall of 2019, so that's exciting. Moving on, this is a design from the Sealed Ones of the Abyss design series that's been going for a little bit. This one posted on January 5th of 2018, and just for the record, most of the samples are going to be probably 2 to 3 per month, I think is what I pulled when I started putting all these together. So you could expect to see a couple, at least a few from each month, any given month throughout the year. But this design is Eraser Venom Shirala from the Sealed Ones series. And the overall point of the Sealed Ones design is that, in a nutshell, they're supposed to be these sort of demonic creatures that were sealed away from the mortal realm. So their overall designs vary quite a bit. Some are giant kind of Cthulhu-esque monsters. Some are more humanoid or a combination of demonic and humanoid components. Shirala here obviously is a spider woman. I think the term is like arachnia or something. Basically humans combined with spider parts. The most noteworthy example I could think of would probably be Quelaag from Dark Souls 1. That was sort of the inspiration for this design. I knew I wanted to try and experiment with humanoid elements as well as something like a demonic spider. And what I ended up doing was using the humanoid base models that I've got in all the different poses, and then sketching out the components for the body and then adding all the details on the spidery bits. The weapon here is supposed to be like a double-sided glaive, a bladed glaive, and I basically did that by creating each half and simply mirroring it. And then once everything was put together, quote-unquote, in post, I could just layer the glaive and make it look like she's holding it. For the color palette, I went with a mix of blues for her body and then the spider parts. I wanted to go with darker highlighted parts for the legs, and I didn't want to get too busy on the color scheme for the rest of the body, so instead I added these lighter green highlighted sections. They could be either crystals or like eyes. I do that a lot on designs, I'm sure, as we'll see as we're moving along. As we move along, it sort of helps to break up the design and add color contrast. So I'm pretty pleased with how this one turned out. I haven't been posting the sealed ones to our Redbubble store for t-shirt designs. I've sort of been toying with the idea and haven't quite committed to doing that yet. But if I do, then the updates will be on the Redbubble store, and I'll update the listings on DeviantArt if I do decide to start posting these as shirt or assorted product designs. Moving on, this design is from January 8th, 2018, and this one is part of the Elemental Sundial series. This design is called Mad Gaze Auriok, and the Sundial series is not one I work on frequently. I tend to design new entries in that series kind of sporadically and maybe post between, I don't know, 1 or 2 per year, depending on how many I have. The way I decide what goes up on the DeviantArt site and or the Redbubble stores kind of just dependent on what's been posted, so not one series is sort of dominating the upload schedule. But to recap, since I can't remember if I covered the Elemental Sundial series in the last retrospective, this series is meant to be sort of a nod to the old Aztec sundial carvings. It's meant to be a central design, sometimes circular or even square, and arrayed around the perimeter of the design are the different quote-unquote traditional elements. We have fire, water, earth, or stone, and wind, and sometimes I'll include the unofficial elements, which would be ice, lightning, light, and shadow. This one is just I guess natural elements is what they're called. I don't know what they're called normally, but this one just has the normal 4. And the overall point of this one was sort of a otherworldly, one-eyed horror creature. Well, I guess more than one eye in the middle, and then all of these other things going all the way around are smaller eyes, I guess, hence the title of Mad Gaze. But this one was interesting because it was definitely a different take compared to some of the other ones in the series. Most of the other ones tended to be demon faces or sort of a more straightforward type design, and this one was much higher in detail due to the sheer volume of smaller parts, these eyes. I had to be really careful when I drew these because when I eventually took the final render and dropped it into the template for the final image, I had to make sure that each of these was not too close together, otherwise deleting all of the background out of those sections would have been difficult. But I think it worked out alright. This one I don't remember if we added to the store. I'd have to look. But I can imagine trying to screen this one would be difficult just because there's tons of small sections. I'm sure the folks at Redbubble, for the different designs that I've made up there, they probably don't like me because some of them are very, very complex. They don't have a lot of colors, but there's lots of small detail sections which are probably easy to screw up if you're not careful in the screening process, but it sort of is what it is there. Next up, this is probably one of the final designs from January of 2018. This one was posted on January 19th of that month. This is one of the Arachnios Weavers series, Ash Claymore Virideos. And I don't remember if I covered this design series in the last video. I probably should have gone back and seen what I talked about, but it's been quite some time since that video was posted. Just to sort of recap, in case I didn't talk about it then, the Arachnios Weavers series are these spider-like creatures. They're supposed to be spider demons, greater spider demons according to the lore. And the main point is that they're elementally aligned, like most of the designs. And they have an overall pretty recognizable spider shape, but the bodies are usually designed so that they have distinct markings or attributes that look like a face. And it creates kind of an interesting design contrast with the head, the actual head of the creatures down here. This is just the body. But because of the way the head and the body are designed, it looks like this overall would be a face. Some of these accomplish that a little more effectively than others. But it's always an interesting challenge when I'm doing one of these to keep in mind the whole idea that they're supposed to reflect some sort of element. This one here is fire. The overall color scheme is supposed to be this burnt sort of, not quite ashen, but dark volcanic type scheme, and the markings on the body and the legs are sort of meant to contrast the darker limbs, and then I added the accents on the outside like flames. This thing was probably somewhat indirectly inspired by the Phantasm monster design from Bayonetta. It's a giant, fiery, demonic tarantula looking thing. But part of the interesting thing for doing the Weavers series, in addition to trying to come up with new ways to experiment with the elemental concepts, is doing the lore. I'm sure if anyone has seen some of the other things that I've posted over time, a lot of the design series have lore that are either connected to the greater universe that I created for the Faceless Summoner, or they'll be kind of standalone little bits of lore for each of the pieces. I do enjoy doing that. I don't write professionally, but over the years I have done a decent amount of fiction and other types of writings, so being able to sort of tack on little bits of lore for these designs sort of makes them more interesting. And it's always a fun challenge trying to come up with something that reflects the piece, if that makes sense. Okay, looks like there's still a couple more designs from January of 2018. This one was posted on January 27th of that month. I think I know why this one is here. This is the Monster Hunter circular emblem for Nergigante. I believe I posted this the day Monster Hunter World actually came out. I don't know if it was on the 27th. I'd have to go look. But I believe this was sort of a special circumstance, since normally I post the circulars at the beginning of the month, but I wanted to do something a little bit special for World since the overall release of that game was very highly anticipated. It was probably my most anticipated game of early 2018. And Nergigante, the Elder Dragon flagship for Monster Hunter World, was part of the promotion for the game. It was on a lot of the promo materials for it. You could fight this one in the demo. So I figured it'd be fitting to do a Circular Emblem for Nerg in celebration of the release. And to quickly go through its design, Nergigante is a winged elder dragon. It's mostly on all fours, but it has 2 large wings, and its body is covered in all sorts of spikes. These spikes continuously regrow as you're fighting it and trying to kill it. And as it gets angrier, the spikes will grow faster. And if you don't break them off and allow them to harden, it basically becomes armor. And the different parts of its body that are covered in spines, they turn black. And if you still don't find a way to break them off or knock it down, at some point, in addition to your weapon bouncing off the spiky bits, it'll do a certain move where it flies up and dive bombs the area to break all of its spines off and just does a ton of damage. So I knew when I was working on the Circular Emblem for this one of the main things I had to be sure to include were lots of spikes. That's its quote-unquote gimmick. So that's why you see on its arms, along the tail, on the wings, and its head especially, you have all the different spikes. And its overall color scheme is kind of dark for the main body. It's got some reddish highlights. And then the wings have a lighter, almost orange, gradient-looking color scheme. So rather than get too complicated with that, I simplified it down a little bit to this lighter tan in-between color, and then everything else I matched up with the in-game color palette. Overall, this one was pretty well received. Just in case I don't mention it at some point, like I briefly mentioned in the beginning, these get posted monthly. I put up the Monster Hunter circulars on DeviantArt and also on the Monster Hunter subreddit. I don't know if those guys know me for my work there, but each month I will post a new entry in the series over there, and people can check them out. And I did the same thing for this one when the game released, and it was a nice kind of fun thing to sort of do before we all lost many hours playing Monster Hunter World on consoles. Moving on, we are now officially in February of 2018. This design is another one from the Sealed Ones of the Abyss, and this one's called Arcane Sinner Tezerul. Like we noticed in Shirala's design a few entries back, the whole concept of the Sealed Ones, again, is these sort of archdemons that were banished from the mortal plane and sealed away because they were dangerous. Some of the designs are a bit more abstract than others, and some are kind of in between, like Tezerul here. I knew I wanted to go for, again, a sort of otherworldly demonic design, and this one, to sort of go through the different bits, it's not really bipedal, since its lower body is this sort of insect-like part with the different legs, and then this section here is kind of like vines or tentacles connecting them, and this part in the middle could be like either a false face or sort of another face in its body, and the actual head is up here. When I designed this one, I put all the different parts together, and most of the somewhat humanoid type designs in the series are using a weapon like we saw with the one earlier. This one I decided, because the whole lore behind this one is that it was like a mage, an arcane mage of sorts, I designed this staff here with the different parts hanging off of it as a sort of, I guess, a catalyst. I think they call it in Dark Souls. That would be a focal point for channeling spells. And another thing I did for this one, which shows up on some of the Sealed Ones designs, but not all, is I added this runic mark, like a summoning circle type thing, underneath, which sort of pairs with the whole idea that these are really powerful arcane creatures. And I think it fit well for this one to sort of complete the design. I kind of arbitrarily decided whether or not I wanted to include a runic seal for the other ones. I guess we'll have to see as the whole commentary series goes on how many I decided to do that for, but this was one of them. The overall color scheme is pretty neutral. I went with kind of silver grays for the main body and darker purple highlights with red marks on these eyes or crystals that are in both the upper torso and the lower torso. And then the seal itself is sort of this off yellow color. I had kind of toyed with the idea of adding via Photoshop sort of like a glowing highlights or like a filter effect that would show that the seal was kind of glowing with light, but in the end it seemed like it would make the design too busy, so I left it off. Moving on to some of the more basic design series. This one is from February 19th of 2018. This one is from the Sphere series. It's called Voidless Beast. The Sphere series, which I think I talked about in the last retrospective, are part of the shape theme designs that I've been doing since the very beginning, where the base design is created from some sort of shape, and then all the different parts are either cut out or drawn without breaking the overall shape. So in other words, for the Sphere series, they all start with a circle, a solid circle design, and I will carve out or draw in the different parts of what becomes the final design while not losing the original circular shape. So it's sort of like a boundary. Some of the other ones, like the Zodiac series, they're polygons, and the challenge is drawing the design while not completely eliminating the outer starting shape. These ones are a little bit more straightforward because it's just a circle, but basically when I started drawing this one, it was a circular shape, which you can see here, and then I cut out all the different sections and drew in all of the parts of this. It's supposed to be like a face. This is like an alien type face. And then this outer part I added as sort of an outer boundary. Now, these designs tend to be interesting experiments since I never really have an idea of what they're going to look like. And it's sort of a free drawing exercise where I say, okay, I'm going to take a circular shape and just see what results from dividing up the different sections and whatnot. I think there's a couple more recent entries in the Sphere series that sort of demonstrate the thought process whenever I'm doing these, but as I'll probably mention repeatedly throughout this video series like I do on some of the other commentary ones, sometimes I have no real idea what I'm going to draw. As anyone on the stream can probably confirm, I will start with shapes and I'll draw lines, and after a certain amount of time a design will pop out and I'll have no idea where it came from. It'll just sort of happen. But this is one of the results while still sticking to an overall set of rules or constraints for the overall design type. Moving on, this one is from March 16th of 2018. We only had a couple in February that I picked. I think from here on, maybe with a couple exceptions, we'll probably be only seeing a few entries per month. The end goal is for this to not be a 3-hour series of videos. This one will probably be about an hour. If that's the case, I will probably divide it up into 2 parts, 2 half-hour parts, depending on what makes the most sense. Anyway, this design from March 16th of this year is from the Geochromatics series. This design series, which I think I started last year, centers around the idea of geometric shapes or patterns and a unified color scheme. Sometimes there'll be more angular patterns, or sometimes they'll be a bit more organic looking, like this one. This one's called Sakura Thorn. It's meant to be like a cherry blossom type design, taking a page from a lot of Japanese imagery, since the cherry blossom is very popular in Japanese literature. For this one, I started with the outer quote-unquote petal sections and arrayed it around a central point 5 times, and then just kept adding sections around each of the petals and arraying those around 5 times. These spiky thorn bits here were set as a darker color to contrast the quote-unquote blossom in the middle. It's sort of a combination of sharp and curved design sections. And then I chose the pink main color scheme just to match cherry blossom colors. Overall, not much to say about this one. The Geochromatics design series I do post on our store for different product type designs. They tend to work pretty well for shirts or whatever. And I usually post one of these every several weeks or so, depending on what the schedule looks like. Next up, this design is from March 19th of 2018. This is a design from the Armada ship design series. Since this is the first one we've covered in this video, to recap, the Armada designs are meant to be spaceship type designs, inspired by the likes of top-down scrolling shooters like Galaga or Ikaruga or arcade shooters like that. The designs are meant to be viewed top-down, facing upwards. So the front of the ship, the quote-unquote front of the ship, would be up here on this side. You're looking at it from the top. This design is called Frenzy Raiment. It was one of the more organic looking designs. I think I've picked a couple for the video series here, but the Armada series tends to be a lot more angular. I think when I first started doing them way back, they were a bit more blocky and polygonal, and like a lot of sharp angles and straight sections. At some point, in order to mix things up, I started introducing more curved, organic looking ideas, which is how you get designs like this. This looks like it'd be some sort of alien craft versus a regular, traditional looking spaceship. But I do like the contrast and the inclusion of the highlighted sections, just because it's sort of different from what a lot of the designs in the series look like. I try and go back and mix up the style of these every once in a while so it doesn't get stale. But I think this one turned out pretty decently. Moving on, we are in April of 2018. This design is from the Organics series, I believe. This one is called Spiral Sight. The Organics series is a sort of really broad classification for designs that I draw that don't fit into the ship designs. They're not from one of the theme series like the Sealed Ones or the Weavers, and they're not from a video game series like the Monster Hunter or Brave Frontier designs. So usually if something is a lot more alien or tentacle themed, which we'll probably see a lot more of in some of the other samples that I've picked, I tend to put them in the Organic series, since that seems to be a good catch-all for those. This one uses a lot of the ideas that we saw on the Geochromatics one a few entries ago, where I took just a section and drew out all of the bits and then arrayed it around a central point, in this case 6 times. The polar array command, which is how I do those in Rhinoceros, is really handy for taking an idea and just copying it around a central point, revolving it around a central point really easily. I don't know how other more standard software like Photoshop or GIMP or Clip Studio do that. I'm assuming there's a way to manipulate shapes and parts of drawings in order to do something similar. But for Rhinoceros, one of the reasons why I like that program is for things like this, taking one section and then copying it around a point 360 degrees takes 2 clicks. It's very simple, and in the case of designs like this, it's really easy to take that and create a design with a couple commands. Other than that, this one looks like it'd be some sort of alien design on a flag or a ship, or it could be something that you would encounter out in the depths of space. That tends to apply to a lot of the organics designs. This one is another example of what happens when I just start drawing without an idea in mind and experimenting with commands. Something like this pops out, and that's the design. Okay, we are moving on into May. This one was posted on May 2nd of 2018. This one is another one of the Monster Hunter circular emblems, and this one is for the creature called Puke Puke. As we'll see from, I'd say, the majority of the Monster Hunter designs in 2018 that I picked, a lot of them are from Monster Hunter World, since that was what had just come out, and a lot of the monster designs were somewhat fresh in my mind. So I picked a lot of those for the circulars just because I wanted to try and take a stab at the new monsters that had been introduced to the series. So Puke Puke is a flying wyvern, I believe its type. It's either a flying or bird wyvern. So it has 2 legs and two wing arms, and its overall design is very reminiscent of a chameleon. Its face has these horn ridges and these 2 kind of bug eyes that can point in different directions, and a long sticky tongue. And its whole gimmick is that it spits poison everywhere, and it can eat different parts of the environment, and it affects the type of poison it spits. And its body is mostly green, but its tail has sort of a rainbow color scheme going along it, which is why you see the color variation here. For the overall pose, because using this sort of layout works well for the circulars without getting too busy, I chose to have its wing sort of tucked underneath it, and then the tail would wrap around. As the name might suggest, the circular emblems, I try and retain as much of the circle shape as possible. It's one of the rules for the design series I try and stick to. Because the tail completes the circle and its overall body isn't too long, that wasn't super difficult for this one. Part of the challenge was getting all of the parts of the wing, the sort of wing fingers. I still haven't figured out what that's called. And then the webbing in between, and the end of the wings are these sort of like flat, I don't know what you call them, but they look like flattened almost fingertips at the edge of each of the wingtips. Those were part of the design elements I knew I had to include on this one, and I think it turned out alright. I think this one was pretty well received on the subreddit. Overall, it's a pretty entertaining monster, and I had fun drawing it. Okay, moving on to May 4th of 2018. This is a design from the Clans Collab series that I work on and off. This is a collab series with one of the other studio artists we have who does these sort of chibi manga-esque type characters, and actually the one who does my title cards for the majority of my YouTube videos, Tyverd Kizuna. This series is where I take one of his chibi designs and I draw it using the Brave Frontier style silhouettes, where I start with a pose and I draw the character based on the original art and try and capture all their design elements in a flat 2D emblem type design. For this one, this character's name is Arden Arios, and for this character, I knew one of the things I had to include was this creature in the back. This particular clan or race has the ability to shapeshift into these large, like reptilian-looking creatures. They're called Fenris, I believe. I think I had a couple of these in the last design retrospective. The whole point is that they can turn into these really powerful creatures. So I wanted to make sure and include a render for both the shifted form and the original character in the emblem. So I took this sort of, rearing back ready pose, and I drew out the character's clothing and armor. I tried to focus on this sort of vest-like outfit that this guy is wearing, and because it's not super detailed in the original concept art, I didn't have to add a whole lot to the silhouette here. I'd say designing the creature in the back took a lot longer. And so after I had the main quote-unquote humanoid portion down, then I used a different set of pose bases that I have for creatures like this, and I chose this lunging pose since it matched the pose of the person, and then I just started drawing out a lot of these attributes like the fur and the tail and the claws and the limbs. These creatures kind of have a mix of like reptile, lizard features and canine features, so I tried to sort of capture that when I was drawing the render for the alternate form in the back, and I think it turned out pretty well. I went with a darker green to sort of contrast the lighter green of the character in front. And then up here, this is the insignia for the clan here. I was the one who was tasked with drawing the clan insignias for the 11 races that make up the overall universe that these characters come from. So as we'll probably see if I included any of the other ones here on the list, the clan emblems that I designed are included here. The original work is here, the original character is here, and then whatever I designed is in the middle. And I don't know if I mentioned it before, but these chibi design characters are also being systematically added to the Redbubble store. I need to buy some of the stickers so I can test the print quality, since I'm the one who sort of vets a lot of the quality designs that get posted. I'd be curious to see how the whole hand-drawn or digitally drawn characters show up from the Redbubble products compared to the screens on t-shirts and whatnot and stuff I've done, but that'll be something to cover later, I think. Okay. This one was posted on May 9th of 2018, and this particular piece is somewhat significant because it marked the debut of something brand new that I have never really done on any art platform up till now. And what this is a kickoff to the Pixel Sprite design series. I think to date, before this was posted, anything I've ever posted has been a two-dimensional design like you saw here, or any on the designs up till now, or it's been a papier-mâché sculpture, which I don't have as part of this video, but the sculptures, the masks, and everything else that I've done, those have been the only two things art-wise I've posted. At some point in the last year, as a way to sort of try something new and just learn a new art style, I decided to try and learn how to draw sprites, pixel-based sprites, something you might find in like a Nintendo or a Super Nintendo game. and it's something I've been working on pretty continuously since the beginning or middle part of 2018, and this was the first thing I posted. So to sort of summarize, this design is called the Elemental Crystals, which are what these little dragon crystal things are called. What I did was I took a base design that I drew, and I created 8 color palettes based on the elements that these creatures would be aligned with. Sort of in line with all the other things that we've seen up till now. I wanted to keep the whole elemental affinity thing consistent for the sprites. So each one of these is aligned with the element you see here: water, fire, stone, wind, shadow, light, ice, and lightning. And what I did was I basically drew these, and then I assigned a color palette based on whatever the element was. And an interesting bit of trivia for these: some of the people on stream might have seen this way back when I started working on these. The first place I started drawing these as just a starting point to learn how to draw with pixels was Paint, MS Paint, which I'm sure is funny to some because it's probably the most primitive form of graphics software that exists to this day. But I wanted to try and learn how to just draw things based on the smallest possible level that you could get in a program, which is literally pixel by pixel. So the first handful of designs that I did were in Paint. It is worth noting that a little bit later I spent some time tinkering around with the ancient version of Photoshop I have, and found a way to set the canvas and resolution size so that I could work at the pixel level, and then everything was very much streamlined from then. My ability to draw these sprites using layers and everything else was a welcome change because it was a lot better than working in Paint. But in the beginning, that's what I was working on, and I'll try and see if I can remember when that changed. But this one was important because this Pixel Sprite series is something I do regularly. I have a new entry in the series posted per week, and I try and draw a few of these every stream in addition to the regular two-dimensional designs. I think we're going to probably see a couple of the Pixel Sprite designs in a row. As a continuation to the one we just saw with the crystals, I sort of took a page from the Pokemon book of mechanics and said, for all the base dragon crystals here, I'm going to draw the quote-unquote next evolution in their life cycle, as it were. So these two here are supposed to be the fire and water next stages from the fire and water ones you see here. And what I did to sort of mix things up, instead of just taking the same base sprite and changing its color palette, I took the base sprite and I added or changed different parts for the whatever next one I was designing. So for this one, I drew horns and added spikes on its tail. For the fire version, I changed its face a little bit, changed the shape of its jaws and its eyes, and added this spiked ridge on the tail, and added some highlights on the body for color. I can't remember how many more of these I did. Then I did this for the rest of the elements. So for stone, wind, shadow, light, ice, and lightning, I took the base model and then I altered it slightly to make a different creature. And I can't remember if I picked all of them for the sample here. But that's basically what that is. It was a good experiment in just iterative design and making small changes. I kind of feel like a lot of game developers, when they're designing sprites for creatures in-game, probably use a similar type of idea. But it was interesting to sort of experiment with that. Okay, we are wrapping up May 2018. This one was posted on May 31st of 2018, and this one is called Swarm Knife Keln. In contrast to the dragonish looking ones we just saw, this one is more insect based. I sort of combined some of the ideas from a fly and a bee and tried to take a page from the RPG monster manuals of creatures you would fight out in the wilds in like a turn-based RPG. One thing to note, the size of these sprites is a little deceptive because for the final rendering, I tend to scale them up or down in the template when I save them, but the base canvas size I work on for all of the sprites, just to sort of keep things manageable for now, is 120 by 120 pixels. The elemental drakes, which is what these are, and elemental crystals before, are smaller in design, but it's hard to tell because they're not scaled the same. So this one, I think this one is pretty close to the full size of the 120 by 120 canvas. I'd have to go and pull the original pings that I rendered out of Photoshop when I drew them. But part of the deceptiveness is just the fact that depending on how big the final render looks, it may or may not be that big when in the actual dimensions of the sprite. For this one, I guess the only other noteworthy thing is I wanted to go for a bit more of a vibrant, venomous looking color scheme, and I haven't studied color theory, so for a lot of these it's just experimenting with color tones and seeing sometimes they'll fit better than others. But I do like how this one has sort of got a whole combination of bright sections that contrast with each other. Next up, we are moving on into June of 2018. This one was posted June 11th of 2018, and this one is called Immortal Vine Arbolia. This is another design from the Sealed Ones series. I don't remember how many in this set that I did, or that I pulled for the sample here. This particular design was part of a connected set of 3 sisters, I believe it was, like 3 demon sisters, and this one is sort of like an Alrane type design, plant-based creature that wields this sort of a scepter or bladed staff. When I started drawing this one, I'd have to look at the video, but I think I started with the jaws of the sort of plant creature that she inhabits, and then I used like the humanoid bases again to sort of set her pose in the middle, and then I just started adding all the rest of the parts of like her body, armor, and everything else. For this one, I did an alternate version. I guess the whole part of the lore is that this demon is able to turn into an alternate form, which looks like a giant plant dragon, I guess, to travel around quickly. So, let me see. I guess it's not in here. There's an alternate version of this that is like a giant plant dragon, like a giant serpentine dragon that uses the jaws here, and then these sort of vine things as the body. I think a couple of the Sealed Ones designs have this sort of quote-unquote alternate form, but it's kind of an interesting experiment. I don't have a ton of experience working with, I guess this would be considered a monster girl? I don't know. Just like the spider one in the beginning, usually it starts around a central theme, in this case, plants, and evolves from there. Next up, this one is from June 20th of 2018. Going back to the Pixel Sprite entries, this one is called Volcanic Flamingo Terai. And one thing that pops up sporadically, I think we'll see it on a couple that I picked for the video series here, is the idea of birds or bird creatures, which I don't have a ton of experience drawing, but every once in a while an idea will pop in my head, and I'll try and put it down in sprite form here. For Tarai, it's sort of like a serpentine winged bird with a fire scheme, fire element, hence the red and orange patterns on the body. But one thing that struck me as amusing about this one when I drew it, I can't remember if this was probably drawn on stream, since I had kind of migrated over to doing a lot of things on Twitch when I do my design streams. I do think this one was done in Photoshop, so from this point on, I think that they're Photoshop designs versus MS Paint. But there's something about its sort of unassuming expression that is amusing to me. The head is kind of toucan-esque in shape, but the whole idea that this thing has this almost blank stare, it's kind of funny to me. And I guess the only noteworthy thing is this one I know is pretty large in size. This was probably close to the full size of the canvas, and I tried to scale it up accordingly in the final render, just to show that it's meant to be a larger design. But overall, this one is kind of weirdly charming in a way. Moving on, we have another one of the Pixel Sprite entries. This one's from July 11th of 2018, and this one's called Rampant Flora Terricalis. And real quick, because I don't think I've mentioned it before, for probably 99% of the drawings and designs I do, be they the two-dimensional designs or the sprites, they follow a really consistent naming convention, which I don't know where I first picked it up. I know Zelda does it a lot, but the whole idea of a three-part naming convention where it's usually an adjective plus a noun plus the name, I don't know what specifically convinced me that I needed to do that for everything, but at some point it just became a running theme that I just ran with all the time. So for, I'd say, the vast majority of the original designs that you're going to see, they have three-part names. So for this one, Rampant Flora Terricalis, it's a giant plant monster. Nothing too complex behind the design itself. I think when I was drawing this one, the whole idea of something kind of Little Shop of Horrors or Final Fantasy Marlboro-esque was in the back of my mind somewhere. So what popped out ultimately was this vine plant creature. I do like the color scheme on this one. It's got a kind of light teal green base color palette with the purple stripes and the lighter yellow eyes. Usually, if I have a good idea what I'm drawing, which sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, I'll try and imagine ahead what kind of color palette I want. But sometimes I don't even know what color the thing's going to be until I get to the end. Another thing, I don't think we'll see it on anything as part of this series, but I've done alternate palettes for the majority of the sprites to reflect other elements. Sometimes they'll be opposite colors, or just I'll take the color palette and I'll manipulate it until it matches the element. At some point in the future, I'll probably be posting those online as well, just to sort of show the experiments with the colors. But for now, the priority is still going to be new designs, new sprites whenever I post these weekly. But we can go ahead and move on. This one is from July 13th of 2018. This might have been the last actual drawing commentary video I've done. I think it is. This one is pretty recognizable if you play video games. The character here is Ridley from the Metroid series, and I believe I drew this one shortly after Ridley was announced for Smash Bros. Ultimate, which just came out recently, in the beginning beginning of December. For background purposes, I'm a big fan of the Metroid series. I played the old school ones a lot more than the newer ones. I started on the Nintendo, played a ton of the second one on Game Boy, played even more of Super Metroid on Super Nintendo. It's one of my favorite video games. And I stuck to the handheld ones and didn't play Prime or the GameCube ones because I didn't have a GameCube. But across the different Metroid games, I would say that Ridley is probably my favorite of the antagonists that Samus fights on her journeys. The whole idea of this giant space pirate dragon as a constant antagonist is interesting to me. So when he was confirmed as one of the playable characters in Smash, I thought I need to find a way to draw an emblem version of Ridley, just one, because it's one of my favorite characters, and two, for the challenge. So I won't really go into a lot of the specifics, since I did do a drawing commentary video for this one. I think it was a 2-part, like 3-hour combined video. But if you're curious about the process and design process that went into Ridley here, you can check that out on the channel. But this one was an interesting challenge. I'm pretty pleased with the way it turned out, and it's been a lot of fun playing with Ridley in Smash. He's one of my favorite characters they've added recently.